We've been hearing and reading so many articles about the so-called afterworld, which right now we are realizing that the world of tomorrow is actually the world of yesterday, and lots of things haven't changed. So I'm going to introduce now the concept of collapsology. So I don't know if some of you have already heard of it, but it has emerged in France around 2015, thanks to the work of Pablo Servigne and other interdependent researchers that are working with him. And so it's a transdisciplinary study of the systemic risks of collapse of our thermo-industrial civilization. And it's also the work of thinking of what to follow it based on reason, intuition, and also scientific work. And so these risks are like, for example, global pandemics, but also wars or climate change, of course, the fossil energy shortage, or even the decline of democracy. And so it is linked to what collapsologists call the great acceleration of human activity. And so we can see here lots of figures, among which some socio-economic trends, but also population and the trends of the Earth system. And so it's a kind of a planetary dashboard that illustrates how the human influence has changed the Earth system. And so we can date this great acceleration beginning with the first industrial revolution, and it unfortunately continues until today. And so little by little, the machine got carried away, and we increased the greenhouse gases, the acidification of the oceans, the deforestation, and so on and so on. And so what's striking about this graph are their exponential shape. And we really realize how our activity has upset the rhythm of the Earth system. And the importance of having this field of study to be transdisciplinary, is that if we take the crisis one by one, they may seem manageable, but it's when we put them in parallel that the complexity is striking, and that we understand the interdependence of all the systems around us, and therefore the risk of the global systemic collapse of our civilization. And so, talking about speed, I'd like to quote another researcher that we like a lot at Future of Futur, and who's unfortunately passed away 2 years ago. It's Paul Virilio. And so he's been working on this question of speed. And so I wanted to talk about his work because as time passes, we are so tempted to accelerate even more because the world around us keeps on accelerating. And so we want to keep pace. But this actually leads to some absurdity, because sometimes we can hear that time is accelerating, which makes absolutely no sense to a physicist. And so if we're being pragmatic, I think that time is this unique and true luxury that we all have when we're born. And it seems really important right now to recall that we have to stop confuse speed with haste. So, according to Virilio, progress and catastrophe are the heads and tails of the same coin. He says that a plane with 100 seats equals 100 deaths. And so what he's been also working on, and is very interesting to see today, is what he calls the affective communism. And so to understand this concept, it's it's really the idea that our emotions are crushed together because everything happens so fast that like a shocking news replaces another, and that's why I've chosen the background images that you can see, and maybe that some of you can recognize. And so, due to the omnipresence of internet and television, Virilio believed that the instant proximity provided by the image replaces a physical co-presence in a given place. And so, according to him, it explains in part the crisis of being together in the city. And so, because we have our emotion crushed, we lose the sense of what is supposed to be where. And so it happened to me personally last month when the Chinese security law passed in Hong Kong. I had a very bad day, and the same day my cousin had a baby, and all the emotions were really like very difficult to handle. And before the end of the day, I just like went crazy. And so this constantly shortening time is an obvious obstacle to understanding the complexity of the world. And especially now with the COVID crisis, I think that lots of people lose their mind so easily, and it makes way too much of conflicts that like could have been avoided. So that's all like for the collapsology. Now I would like to move on to more positive things because I think it's really important to talk about collapsology in a positive sense. So beyond the trauma, what can we do? So sorry, the image is in French, but with the concept of collapsology, Pablo Servigne and his research friends have been working on the relation between collapsology and the mourning curve. So as you grieve, you go through these different steps that can also be in another order, but in general, we start with denial, and then it's fear and anger, then you try to negotiate, and then you go deep into depression, and only after the depression you can go back up to forgiveness, looking for meaning, and trying to find a way to rebuild what has been broken. So here, what has been broken is the idea of the future that one can have. So for example, when I dived into collapsology, it was, I don't know, maybe 2 years ago. And so I started also with denial, thinking, no, this is not real. If I close my eyes strong enough, this will all go. And then you have the fear and the anger, like if I find the people responsible for that, I'm going to kill them. And then you negotiate, like, okay, so if I do this effort, and if I don't know, stop having a car, it's going to be fine. And then everything is so dark. It's the depression, and it's really, really hard to get out of this depression. But after that, as when you manage to accept, forgive, it's where the whole concept becomes exciting, because you can rewrite the future, and that's where the creativity can go in. And so the concept is so distressing that there are some terms for the suffering. So I chose those two, but I know that there's at least one other concept that exists that is from a psychologist, Winnicott, and it's called the fear of breakdown. But these two concepts are more recent, and so that's why I wanted to just spend some time on it. So first, solastalgia is a concept that was introduced in 2007 by Glenn Adler, who is an environmental professor and former professor at the Murdoch University in Australia. In his article, Solastalgia, the distress caused by environmental change. So it's a contraction of the English terms solace and alga. So it's described as a feeling close to nostalgia or melancholy that one can feel when it is far from the beloved home, with the notable difference that here the sadness happens when we are inside the home because the home is burning. And the second is eco-anxiety. Maybe you've heard of it, and it's a concept from Joanna Macy. And so her work addresses the psychological and spiritual issues of our age and the cultivation of ecological awareness and resonance between Buddhist thought and postmodern science. So to go through this difficult process, there's also something else that I think is really key if we want to manage to cope with everything we're living right now, is emotional intelligence. So it's a concept that I have actually discovered quite recently. I think it was like 3 or 4 years ago. And it's really funny because I bought a book by Daniel Goleman, who wrote it in the 90s, actually. And so I bought it thinking, oh, I'm going to be smarter emotionally. And I started reading the book, and within the 10 first pages, I realized I was really emotionally dumb. And the good thing is that I had a very big range of progress within it. So emotional intelligence is the capability of individuals to recognize their own emotions and those of others, to discern between different feelings and label them appropriately, and also to use emotional information to guide thinking and behavior, and to manage or adjust one's emotion to adapt to the environment or to achieve one's goal. And I think that emotional intelligence is the very basics for self-consciousness. And self-consciousness is really needed if we want to reach collective intelligence. And as the problems that we're going through are so big, it's really pretty obvious to me that we cannot go through it individually, and that we really need the help of others to get through it. And so to finish on this, there's also a set of work from Joanna Macy that is really interesting in this topic, is that she's been working on what she calls the work that we connect. And so it's a framework for personal and social change, as well as a workshop methodology for its application. So the idea is that she has some group work designed to foster the desire and ability to take part in the healing of the world. So to continue, I'd like to go further into the work of Pablo Servigne, because after introducing collapsology, he has been working on something that I think is so interesting. It's the concept of collapsosophy. So the idea is really like philosophy is the love of wisdom, and so collapsophy is obviously the love of collapso-wisdom. And it's the idea that after the acceptance stage within the grieving process, you can start thinking about, okay, so if everything falls down, what are we going to do after? But to think about what we're going to do after, we have to debunk some dangerous beliefs. The belief that there is only one law of the jungle, that of the strongest. And so Pablo Servigne wrote a whole book about this idea that solidarity is another law of the jungle. The idea is that really those who survive are the ones who manage to collaborate and help each other, not the ones that are like competing against each other. And we really see that in nature. We can see it in trees. The trees that are like in a forest together, the weakest are nurtured by the strongest, and there are also the mushrooms that help them get to the nutrients into the trees. And so we have to really debunk this belief that we have to compete against each other, because as Pablo says, it's really a belief that is okay when in a time of like normal times, but in uncertain times, it's really dangerous, because we are like blinded by the thought that everything is fine. So I'm going to compete with the others. And so as everything is not fine, this is really dangerous, and it might lead into really not cool outcomes. So the question I want to raise is it a disaster or an opportunity? And so that's now I'm going to finally talk about fashion. The question applied to fashion is like, is the collapse a blank page that everyone has been asking for in the fashion industry? But first, if you want to like work on this blank page, we have to get out of denial. And so the idea that I've been trying to work on is how can we mobilize the current ecosystems to get out of denial. So I'm talking about the ecosystems of the creative industry. And so the idea for me was to ask if we could change what people think to convey the message through aesthetics. What seems clear to me, if we want to get out of denial, is that we need to rewrite the aesthetics of the apocalypse. Because it's really important to be able to have inspiring images, inspiring imagination, to be able to continue on this path, because the fear is paralyzing, and so if we keep on making people scared, I don't think like anything will change. And so the idea with fashion for us is really to use it as a cultural influence, because as you all may know, fashion represents a big part of our culture. This need to dress this is one of the most influential phenomena in the Western civilization since the Renaissance, says Svendam. He says that fashion has conquered an increasing number of modern man fields of activity and has become almost a second nature. And so that's why, as stated in the image, fashion really encroaches the areas of art, politics, and science. And so as this phenomenon lies near the center of the modern world, it has a huge influence on culture and on the society. And hence, this profound role in human culture has created a giant. So these figures are quite important to really realize how big the fashion industry globally is. I have another figure. For example, the global fashion industry employs 1 in 6 human, if you count like everything, the accessories, the textile industry. And so it's really like big. And so we have created our company thinking, okay, if you can change the daily life of 1 in 6 humans, it's like obvious that you can inspire change for the rest to change. And so, where can we start to inspire change from within? And so here, I'm very inspired by the work of one of my friends, whose name is Fabrice Starzinskas, and he's a media artist, and he's been working on this question of creative sustainability. It's really interesting because so as I was working in the advertising industry at the beginning of my young career, I was shocked by this great paradox because everyone wants to work in creative industries, and it's all glamour and cool. But when you actually work with it, you see that we totally ignore the way that we treat our creative minds. And I really think it's like we are pieces of cheese that they are like râpés. I don't know how to say it, but it's really like they don't respect our brains, and everything has been so industrialized in the creative industries that it's like a total nonsense, and we want to move fast, and we just burn our brains through the process. And the idea of Fabrice is really to decelerate, to rethink the cycle, and to shape our creative future without losing ourselves in the process. Because when you realize that there are like lots of burnouts in the creative industry, I think it's really absurd, because we are so lucky to be able to work in fields that we love and to be paid for doing what we love to do. But at the same time, we lose ourselves because the industry is, I don't know how to say it, but it's really, yeah, doesn't have meaning. And so his idea is that we have this idea of permaculture, of perma economy. And so what could be the perma creativity? And to finish on this point, he goes even further, and with the idea of how we can go towards a sustainable everything. And this really could happen with the merging of sustainable creativity and sustainable spending. Because when I was working in the advertising industry, I really experienced some money waste that is like so huge. I couldn't understand why grants could pay €1 million for a film of 30 seconds, and the film is not even good in terms of creativity. And so for me, it was really like throwing the money through the windows, and that's why I stopped working for that advertising. So talking about sustainability, I'd like just to make a little presentation and thinking about the relation with fashion and sustainability, because it's really, for me, an antinomic equation, because fashion, which changes all the time, is really difficult to make it sustainable. And so to do so, the idea is that I want to lift the red carpets of fashion, because before inspiring change, fashion needs to be realistic with its own responsibility. And so to explore that, I wanted to go through the case of fashion production. So as I said before, the Industrial Revolution has started all the shit, I would say. And it's also the case for fashion, because so as you may know, the Industrial Revolution started with the steam machine, and so the way that we produced clothing has changed through the different industrial revolutions, and it has brought us here today, where in between we had this democratization of fashion, which at first wasn't something bad. I mean, giving access to everyone to clothing is not a bad thing. But what is a bad thing is that it has become disposable goods. Sorry, and it also makes people crazy, and so that's really related to the power of influence of fashion on people. And so, as you can see on the picture, it was when the Balmain and H&M collaboration started a few years ago. And so, if we talk about the supply chain of fashion, I think it's really important to also observe that the so-called decolonization that we have been through wasn't really done right. So this is an idea from Céline Seman. And so what she says is that the Western rhetoric of sustainability is all around, okay, we are going to produce things in a better way, but you have to continue to buy it. And so this is really not sustainable. And as she says, Eastern culture are different. And in some of them, the relation to goods is really different. When you have a piece of clothing that is like broken, you're going to repair it and you're going to nurture it in a way. And when we look into the history, it's really striking to see that the decolonization hasn't really yet happened. So yes, of course, we're not colonizing the East anymore in the way that we're not like going to live there. But yet we still use their people to do what we consider is of low value. And at the end of the line, we send them back our garbage, considering that their land is a trash can. And so what is also so disturbing for me is that through this COVID crisis and the confinement, we have been seeing lots of companies saying, okay, we're going to bring back our production in the West. But this, for me, raises a question. Are we going towards a second bad decolonization? And so I've seen like a few days ago, there's this like really disturbing trend on TikTok that's called the Holocaust porn. So it's basically young girls like wearing some makeup and pretending they're living in the Holocaust. And so it's really so disturbing because we're focusing on that. And at the same time, we're all aware of what's happening in China with the Uyghurs. And yet we still continue to buy the shit that the brands are like producing there, using people as slaves. And there are really lots of brands that have been working with these companies. And so, yes, these are like the facts for me that we really need to face in order to change. And to change, I think that the power of imagination is what can really save us. And we need to rewrite the narratives to inspire, as I said before, because fear doesn't inspire. And storytelling is so important, and it can influence the idea spreading, and more importantly, to help people get realistic yet desirable stories and representation of possible futures. Because what's happening now and has been happening for years is that, like, majorly the ideas of the future are saturated by dystopias. And so we're only working on the fears. And I think it's time that we make room for the positive stories. So, of course, there are some utopias that exist, but they don't have the spotlight. So I think it's really important to highlight those in comparison with the dystopias. So to conclude, because I think I was a bit long, I would like to present the concept of our company, which is centered around the concept of agency, not in the sense of advertising agency, of course, but more in the sense of social sciences. So agency is the capacity of action of an agent, its ability to act on the world, on things, beings, to transform or influence them. And so the idea at Future for is that we translate this into our capacity to bring change to the world. And that's why we are an atelier d'agentivité. Agentivité is agency in French. And the idea is that we want to influence the inside of the industry to inspire change outside. And to conclude, I would like to recall to you your own responsibility, because I think that when we are lucky to study in a school like ESSEC, we are amongst the most lucky people in the world. And so this comes with a responsibility, the responsibility to understand and to watch the world and to be empathetic, to try to understand the others and see how we can help them in the way that like is most suitable for us. And so for you, it can be to educate first yourself, but also educate others and engage yourself. Because I think it's really important that we realize that we shall not be fools. It's not the people who have been damaging the world that are going to bring the systemic change that is needed. We need to pressure them from everywhere, from the top, from the bottom, and everywhere, in between. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Noemie. Could you just make sure that we can see you?
Yes.
Thank you. Perfect. Thank you very much, Noemie. I have to say that I really enjoy what you said at the end of your presentation when you rephrased the famous Stanley quote. The famous Stanley quote: "What with great power comes great responsibility. Some great privilege comes also great responsibility." I really appreciate this phrase. It's actually you rephrase the famous Stanley, if I remember well. It's in Spider-Man. Spider-Man at the end of Spider-Man. It's what we can see. We have a few questions. Maybe I'm going to start with this one. You mentioned it is hard for companies to be sustainable due to the fast-moving fashion. How does company deal with this? We cannot see you. We can see you. Could you maybe you can stop sharing, Noemie, your screen? Yeah, thank you. Did you hear the question?
Yes. So, okay. Like you're talking about fashion companies.
Yeah, that's just to repeat the question. You mentioned it is hard for companies to be sustainable due to the fast-moving fashion. How do companies deal with this?
I think it's a different answer for different kind of companies. For example, the luxury industry and the fashion, like more mainstream fashion industry, are working really differently on this. And I think that, like, unfortunately, lots of companies are not dealing with that, or they're trying to make us think that they are doing it, but actually they're not. So that's the greenwashing. But it's really complex because I think that companies are not just like one big entities. I think that companies are like living organisms, and like an organism, they have lots of cells inside of them that make them work and be able to be alive. And so as in a human, I think that in the companies you have healthy cells that are trying to bring the change, and you have less healthy cells, and sometimes you have cancer cells. And I think that these cells are the ones that we need to educate to have them move with us towards the change.
Thank you. We have another question. What role can technology play in influencing sustainable buying habits for fashion?
That's a good question. Because there's this tendency that I really hate, but it's so present. It's called textolutionism. So it's this idea that there's an app for everything, and it makes people think that there's an app for climate change, there's an app for collapsology. It's really, I think that technology can really help. Like, for example, for the problem of the fashion production, the fast fashion production. Of course, the blockchain, for example, can help. But I think it's really more important to realize that the problems that we are facing are problems that we have created, and so it's human problems before there are technological problems. And even if like you had the magic wand, I don't think that things can be addressed that simply, because if we don't want to look into ourselves, I don't think the change can be good.
We have another question about your, there is two things about Future 404. Actually, it's, does it mean that there is a reference with error 404? I don't know if we can hear us, Noemie, because we can see you. We can't. Yeah.
Can you see?
So there is a link between Future 404 and error 404. And to what extent there is a link, there is a reference between both. And still, not the same question, but related to this point, there is a question about the book itself and to what extent to publish a book in a paper, for instance, makes sense with your sustainability approach.
Okay. Yes, so obviously there's a link with the error 404. So the idea of the error 404 is that the page is not found on the website. And so with us, the idea was that the future has not been found yet. And that's what we explore through our work at Future 404. And so for the second question, it's a really good question. And I've honestly waited quite some time before starting working on this paper publication. And I've been exploring a lot of solutions in terms of printing and in the choice of the paper to use more sustainable solutions. But I think like the decision to actually do it really came from a struggle, a frustration that we had when writing online. So because we started with a blog, and so the problem when you write online is that you need to publish really fast the articles, because otherwise all the medias are writing about the same topics, and it ends up that no one is going to read your piece if you publish it too late. And so yeah, it was really frustrating, and I thought, okay, if we want to demonstrate that we need to take the time to think, we have to go through paper.
Thank you. There is a question again regarding Future 404, but about a more personal question, which is actually, what is your daily routine? What you're doing in your professional daily life?
So every day is not the same, because so like what we do is consulting for fashion and luxury companies. So that's like mainly what we do. But as a business owner, I don't know, I have so many different things I need to do. And so I would more like compare my work to a fire worker, because when you manage a company, what you do is to manage all the fires that are around you. So I don't know if it really answers the question, but yeah, I write articles, I work on recommendations, I do conferences, I meet people a lot. And I think that's the part of my job that I really prefer, meeting new people and getting inspired by people that are different from me.
We have a lot of questions. Unfortunately, we are not able to go through all of them. And maybe if you okay, Noemie, I can share the question with you, but as well as your contact, if you don't mind. There is maybe one question to conclude, and I guess it shaped a bit a few questions. What is your dream? What is your dream? You came from different industry, I would say, advertising as well as fashions, your culture as well, your backgrounds. You came from Asia and also from Europe. I know Alan comes from Africa. His origin comes from Africa. So actually, what you two wants to design for the future? What are your contribution you want to make? What is the dream that you want to achieve within the next couple of months, maybe a couple of years, thanks to what you've started?
Well, that's a difficult question. I think as a company and as like with the purpose that we have, we want to inspire the industry to change so that the change can like go spread wider. But yeah, I think it is that. And my personal dream is that like even if we have to go through really difficult times, I really hope that someday the solidarity as I imagine it can happen. And I think there are like so many different levels on which you can do it. And like, for example, I'm trying to do it on a professional level, but I'm also trying to do it on a personal level. So I'm living in the 17th district of Paris, and like in big cities, people don't talk to each other. And I've been trying for years to like connect my neighbors together and like to have a little village within my neighborhood. But that's so hard. And so, yeah, I think it's a dream.
Thank you, Noemie. Thank you very much. It's a very inspiring talk. And it's a demonstration, actually, how people can do a few changes. It could be with your neighbor, as you just said, as well as in a major and toward major companies, in the front of major companies in a fashion industry. Thank you very much, again, for your talk on behalf of the students.
There's I'm working on a series of articles that explains and go deeper into all the concepts that I have presented, and hopefully it will be ready soon. So I'll send you the link. It will be on Future for.
Thank you very much, and we're gonna share that for sure with all our community. Thank you again, Noemie, and hope to meet you in person within the next couple of months. Thank you very much.